Okay, everyone, thank you for coming back to our event today. I'm so excited that you are here because I wanted you to meet Sacha Stone for a long time. And I've been watching Sacha over this last year on many different videos and many different interviews. And I just think he's one of the best and most powerful voices in the world today in terms of uniting people, because there's so much division in our world today. And this man is clearly committed himself to uniting people from different religions, races, nations, political viewpoints, all of that. Am I saying that right, Sacha, that that's what your kind of goal is to unite people?
Indeed, and very good to meet you, Clyde. Thank you for the kind words.
Yes, absolutely. And just to give people a little bit, you've been you're Director General of the Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Organization. So
yeah, that was United Nations IGO, or Intergovernmental Organization. And I start always with the caveat that I'm no fan of the UN or the global enterprise. All of the multilateral institutions I've always found highly toxic, but I did my best to hack into the system at that time to see if there was any rewiring that could be done. In point of fact, I was bid to do just that by good people in leadership within the United Nations, who themselves recognized that it was very necessary.
You know, it seems like no matter how deep the corruption is in some of these agencies, there's always some good people somewhere within them.
Always maintained, with the UN in particular, 50,000 people working, 49,900 bloody good people. The top 10 people, very good people. Then you've got a small technocracy that is inserted in there, carrying the Sabbatean agenda.
Wow, that's amazing. So Humanitad is an international organization dedicated to uniting nations, faiths, cultures through the realization of projects and programs which celebrate unity. So you bring together core ideas and promote international arts, cultural, and education program, basically with the idea of uniting. And then also I see that you're involved with research and development of sustainable technologies as well.
Yes, that's been a focus for many long years, and we're passionately embroiled in that sector.
That must bring you in contact with Foster Gamble, because he's so much into that as well. I mean, you two must.
Indeed, I know Foster and Kimberly very well as beloved friends. I've stayed with them my last trip to the US, and in fact, I feature in their last film. Indeed, a very laudable people.
Let's talk a little bit about your work with Humanitad before we get into the tour.
Sure, I set that up as a idealistic folly 23 years ago. It's served in different ways. I thought at the time when I began sort of transitioning from rock and roll into peace activism, because I was very well connected at that time, and I thought, well, I may as well use those contacts to good effect and promote intercultural, interfaith fellowship, and really try and advance those aspects of the human story, which I was passionate about, not least because I grew up in a war in sub-Saharan Africa and had that backstory to really contrast against where I was at 23 years ago. So I began that journey, and as the longer I went on that, and did a lot of diplomacy, so citizen diplomacy, working in creating initiatives and taking forward ideas that could bridge cultures and faiths. What I recognized after a few years of meeting innumerable figures on the international landscape, different cultures, different faiths, different political persuasions, but from a leadership level, I was taught along the way for the first 5-6 years, certainly, that peace was not factored into the business plan, and that I was a sweet kid, but I ought to really hang up my boots and do something useful, like make money in life, because it wasn't going to get anywhere pursuing interfaith and intercultural fellowships. So I became educated quite cynically by leadership. And then that slowly turned my attention toward, well, what is going on in the basement? If the whole game is rigged and good leaders are advising me not to get involved in good activities, even though they themselves are good people, I'm thinking, what's wrong with this program? So then one starts to look and ask different kinds of questions. And then what you discover is not very attractive. And then you're led by conscience to go further into that. And then people start contacting you, whistleblowers and other people who've exited from leadership pick up the phone and call you. And you start to aggregate and galvanize a real narrative connected to what's been going on in the basement, not just during the status quo, but historically. And then you get drawn further and further into that, drawn by conscience, actually. And that ended up becoming my compulsion. So when I was approached by the UN to get involved in the IGO, the Intergovernmental sector, in fact, I was asked to come in and help sex up the UN agenda through the Millennium Development Goals. And I said, well, I don't agree with them. Why would I, come in? Oh, we need people like you on the outside to come in and help replenish the narrative. So I thought, well, great, maybe this would work. And so I agreed that I would come in and for a time, unpaid. I refused to take any coin. But it became clear that I was just being assimilated into that.
Yeah.
Now and then meeting so many permanent representatives, ambassadors, and good people in the system who themselves had become quite defeated and given up their great idealistic notions that they'd come in from, Burkina Faso or Botswana or Cambodia back in the day to join the UN, all became some jaded so I exited very quickly from that, and then started becoming more of a hardline, frontline activist to talk about the real shit going on in the basement, which led me to really meeting with important people who came to me and said, okay, you've got the balls to tell these stories and to still work diplomatically speaking, conducting that narrative at that level. Well, you need to know about pedophile rings. You need to know about, ritual sacrifice. You need to know about these things. And then I was taken into that realm. Not attractive, cold night sweats, fevers, horrible to go through that when you're getting that kind of data dump and knowledge dump at a professional level from powerful people. It's scary as hell. And I went through that over 10 years ago, acclimatized myself, and in 2015 established the International Tribunal for Natural Justice in order to begin to seek remedy through a forum that I knew could not be rigged.
Wow. Okay. So you just kind of broke off and started your own international organization so that you wouldn't have to deal with what you called the technocrats.
So that we could conduct judicial commissions of inquiry and investigations into the status quo to the best of our limited ability, nonetheless tapping into the pulse of humanity and going with that narrative. Like right now, there's about to become a huge media sting on me in Scandinavia. They've got scouts out there hunting me down, trying to get my feedback before they begin their blitzkrieg against me for being a terrorist, for being somebody who raises satanic pedophilia in government and so on, because I've hosted a number of live stream broadcasts with people who've suffered at the hands of the
I know you have. I know you have.
Right. So you put yourself out there, Clyde, and that's what you get back, but that's part of the process.
Well, you can see that they're going to have to do that because they know it's coming and it's already started. I mean, I thought there was a pretty big dump of disclosures at the Tulsa event by Lynn Wood on the pedophilia and also the adrenochrome. I mean, it was flat out full disclosure of all.
And I like to think that it was our Judicial Commission of Inquiry into child sex abuse, pedophilia, and human trafficking in 2018 in Westminster, London, that broke the ice there. I brought Robert David Steele in, and we had him appointed as chief counsel. And those seatings in Westminster 2018, I've heard from intelligence agencies, were absolutely the icebreaker. So I loved hearing what I heard come out of Lynn Wood, that very blessed man. Lee Dundas was also on that stage and tore it up. She's one of our partners on the Arise USA tour.
So I've seen Lee speak before. I did not catch her at Tulsa, but tell me if you agree with this. What it felt like to me, I watched as much of it as I could because I was doing interviews, so I couldn't go. But I talked to Ty Bollinger, who was there, and I watched as much of it as I could. And the feeling that I got in my heart was that it's like a football team that has been on defense for a long time and they just can't get their offense going. We were that, and now we're on the offense. That was what I felt happened in Tulsa.
I think that's a very, very circumspect and intelligent aspect you've taken. I would agree with you. The dynamic has almost certainly shifted.
Yes.
And it's from back foot to front foot is exactly how I put it. The cornerstone of our blood economy and social ecology, Clyde, for the last 2,000 years, since the Caesars of Rome, has been and remains ritual sacrifice of innocence and the harvest of humanity. I mean, what do you think the indentureship to getting a corporate job is, or getting a job wearing a uniform, hiding behind the seal of office or the corporation? All of this is how our lives have become fictionalized, from living sons and daughters of God into indentured plantation slaves 2.0, which is all we can describe ourselves as, so long as we are required to go and put our time and motion toward work in order to make coin to pay to Caesar to protect us from Caesar. I mean, it's just insane. And of course, now it's not that Caesar or government protects us from anything. A government has become the threat, the existential threat against the living sons and daughters of God, when it starts to mandate that we can't breathe oxygen or stand in the sunlight or hug one another in the streets, for the love of Christ. And worse still, is seeking any which way to force a mandatory cocktail of lethal synthetic molecules into our veins under cover of a pandemic, So we're in pretty deep doo-doo as a civilization, and it's all connected to blood cult and bloodlust and sacrifice of innocence, as I said, and macro deception. I mean, how the proverbial snake in the Garden of Eden has managed to slither its way through the annals of history, eventuating into this, a monstrous pandemic dreamt up by public health administrators in collusion with the bankster class in Davos that are driving and owning our governments, is an insanity.
Yeah, and part of that, all of that is the war machine, constant eternal wars, one after another. Yes. In my lifetime, started, I was born in 49 and we were in the Korean War. And then, then it was that they started to get us into Vietnam early in the 50s. They really were working, and the CIA was working in there. And then, that's what really kind of changed my whole perception, is realizing, how many of my friends were dying in this war in Vietnam for absolutely, there was no reason for us to be there. I mean, it just went against everything our founders thought we should be doing in terms of our foreign relations, to be traveling, 7,000 miles away, be fighting in the jungles of Vietnam. It's total insanity. But they control the media, they control education, and they just, it's amazing. But it really woke a lot of people up. That Vietnam War woke a lot of people up.
Well, you would think, and of course, one of the leading proponents of peace and all that in the day was Jane Fonda, and look at her today. She's the most vehement liberal intellectual, inverse parasitic intellect, completely moving against the true vein and pulse of freedom, and she's playing hardline into the fictitious realm. So it's a very sad indictment, but I see that with so many liberal intellectuals and so many of these trumped up celebrity icons. They simply toe that very, very orchestrated liberal intellectual line, which has become the antithesis of everything that those icons pretended at being and probably believed they were 50, 60 years ago. I find that a travesty.
Oh, it's completely changed. I voted Democrat a couple of times in those times. I even joined the Socialist Party when I was 20 years old, mainly because of corporatism and the Vietnam War, and I could see that the corporations were controlling everything. And and then I became a libertarian after I kind of grew up a little bit. But and
ultimately, good libertarians ultimately transmute even that and become good humans and evolve beyond the two-party tyranny and the democratic soup kitchen, because it's all bullshit. The whole thing is bullshit. It's all that Hegelian dialectic is the problem. The fact that we've allowed ourselves to be binarized and dualized into this cult programmed left, right hemisphere nonsense. But I think that the beauty of this insidious corona COVID deception that has created a kind of Twilight Zone horror sci-fi movie script of all of our lives. I think that the beauty, the beneficence and the benediction from the Almighty that comes through this grand deception we're living through is going to almost certainly be the aspect of the Christed human being defined through this fog of war against humankind.
I think what you're at, you put it beautifully, and I think basically it's driving us to a unified consciousness, because that's the way we're going to survive, is through unity consciousness, that we're realizing that we are all one, and that the consciousness that you and I have is one consciousness, and we're just expressing it through this nervous system. You know, it's just like, you know, it's just the sun going through different glasses that are, you know, the glass is slightly different, but the sunlight going through the glasses is the same sunlight. It's the same consciousness. We're all one. You know, and if we wake up and realize that that consciousness is love and unity and bliss, and that's who we really are. And we're born to be blissful and joyful, and we're moving in that direction. But we have to go through, like you say, all this crap and all this evil, I guess, to teach us, you know, who we really are and what we
which is not right, which is not the corporate fiction. So we are not the fiction. We are not the indentured trust. We are not the birth certification. We are not the name in block black capital letters on a piece of godless paper that is handled by banksters in the US Treasury Department, who themselves are good people, knowing not what they do invariably. But the point is that every living soul throughout the Great Plains of America are indentured slaves on paper, bonded to paper, the time and motion of their lives harvested into that bond. And that bond contained ultimately through the Crown of England and the Vatican complex. You know, after it's moved through the US Treasury Department and on the floor of the stock exchange as the bonds move, and then through the Bank of International Settlements. So when people do wake up in the fullness of time and realize that the last century plus was all about fictionalizing living flesh into the fiction. And that's the great Luciferian cloak that was thrown across, the thrall that was thrown across humankind, again using orchestrated wars, the fog of war within which to rearrange the furniture, which is what these sons of bitches, excuse my language, have done consistently and very, very well, and to very, very good effect. You know, when the Rothschilds and the Morgans were rigging, you know, the city of London, and then it was all so craftily orchestrated. Of course, now they can't get away with quite the same kind of foul poker play. So what they've had to do in the last half a century is to weaponize fully the public health administration sector in order to, by stealth, force the poisoning, the toxifying of land, soil, air, and water, and human beings. So we've now become, through agrochemical and pharmaceutical enterprise, we've become entirely poisoned, weaponized with glyphosates, fluorides, phosphates, all of these, aluminum, mercury, all of these insane chemical compounds now have embedded themselves into our bodies. And now they're seeking to inject us with a technology that modifies human DNA. Right. Irretrievably, I'll add, okay, and then activate a kill grid called 5G, which we know about these weaponized frequencies. We know because weapons development experts are the ones teaching us. And many of the great, you know, whistleblowers coming forward are the greatest minds amongst that science fraternity. They are the ones who are telling us what this is. It is a kill grid. It is a Skynet. And what is the purpose of that? Ultimately, hijacking of humankind through the life force. Yeah. I mean, I could go into do a 3-hour lecture on the mechanics of how the human biome and the isotope frequencies of your DNA are being targeted by the all-seeing eye through the artifice of that apparatus. I can go into it, but I mean, my film 5G Apocalypse, I think, goes some way toward describing that fairly deftly to people who are interested in the real existential threat.
What's the name of that again? We should say that, let everyone know the name of the film and how they.
5G apocalypse, the extinction event.
Okay, and they can just Google that
Yeah, I think I released that film 2.5 years ago, well in advance of what's happening now, almost entirely predicting what has been happening. I think it's essential. It's still millions and millions of people watching that film constantly. It's constantly being taken down, but it's gone too viral. Even 2.5 years ago, it went viral. So they can't quite expunge it from the airwaves. But I do recommend anyone goes to see that, because I lined up top microbial scientists and weapons development experts and people in the telecom industry. There's so much information in that film. It's not very long, I think just over an hour. We just did a screening here last week here in Bali, Indonesia, and then live streamed it. We have tens of thousands of people coming in to view a screening. But yeah, well worth watching.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll definitely get the word out on that. I'm glad you mentioned about the bonding of the our cells in our corp to create us into a dead corporation so that they can control us and trade us on the stock exchange and all of that, because we have 5 speakers on that topic in this summit, and I really want to get that out there, because I believe that that's one peaceful way for us to change things, by getting enough people to realize who they are and extradite themselves by doing the paperwork to get out of the US citizenship, out of the corporate realm, out of the corporate slavery, into the land jurisdiction, and reestablish the original republic in America, and repopulate that republic. And it's going well. I mean, you've got Judge Anna out there, you've got David Straight, you've got other group, Dave Roberts is another group that's doing it. You've got several different groups that are doing the same thing. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is getting them all together. Yeah, I'm a member of the CSPOA, and I have been for years. I helped Richard Mack put together the first constitutional sheriff convention in 2012 in Las Vegas.
Great.
I had a group that helped do that, and we raised all the money to pay for the sheriffs to get there, so they didn't have to pay anything, and for their room and board while we're there. Had 113 sheriffs there, which is 3% of the sheriffs in America. And
wow, that all?
Yes.
Wow.
And I gave a speech. I did the address at night. I was master of ceremonies in the evening, and introduced Tom Wood. Tom Woods was our speaker. But on my speech, I talked about how 1% of any entity, and it's a physical principle of physics, 1% of the photons in a light, diffuse light, line up in one coherent pattern, and it becomes a laser light. So we had 3% of the sheriffs there. It was a big event. And the feeling level was incredible. It was really an amazing thing. I'm very glad that we did that.
Well, I'm not sure how many are meeting shortly in Nevada. We're intending to start the tour there, but they're all flying in for that, and we're getting the coaches sent across there.
There's a couple of sheriffs we know in Nevada. Jesse Watt and Sheriff Worley and Frump, who are very strong constitutional sheriffs. So I'm sure they'll be there, and Sheriff Lamb from Nevada or Arizona. There's so many of them, and there's more, because there's more of the sheriffs that are speaking out and realizing that it's their role, constitutional role, to protect the Bill of Rights and the constitutional rights of their citizens. More are starting to come forward, and I think it's a huge thing. I'm glad you're doing that.
Couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah. We have beautiful people, and most of the people on our planet are beautiful, wonderful people. It's just a very small percentage of people, really, that control this whole network of evil, right? I mean, it can't be more than a few thousand people, right?
Well, I can tell you, I can drill that down for you. I mean, it's essentially 3,000 odd. I mean, if you're referring to the black nobility, who are the landed class, the ones who inherited really the wealth of ages through all sorts of noxious compacts and covenants and trust funds and all the rest of it. So there are about 3,000 of them, and they're people who you would actually hang out with at Burning Man or Tulum and think were very fine people at a dinner party. This is the curious thing. I know because I've moved amongst that echelon for some time, and socially bumped into those characters. And I've had plentiful engagements with people connected to that echelon who themselves are leaving and pulling out and revoking the contracts and want nothing to do with that familial tendencies. Or those Masonic occultic connections. So I've been, because I've connected to a lot of royalty over the years and been in that echelon, obviously I don't go to those parties. I'm persona non grata to that element that we're against. But there are a lot of good people in the aristocracy and on the fringe of the royalty who themselves are they're collateral. They're not involved in any Sabbatean nonsense. They know nothing about it. They're just born into certain genealogical bloodlines, and they inherit a mansion here, a stately home there, or a castle there, and try to get by and rent the place out for weddings to get by, because it's all collapsing. The old empire is collapsing, and the evil empire, and the core wealth has been collapsing into the core cabal within that nobility. And that's something which is an extension of the Vatican complex and the Crown of England. So it's still highly compartmentalized. But the point I'm making is this: you can't imagine that all of these people are evil, because they're not. In my experience, there's a very, very small echelon that are involved in the Sabbatean practices or blood cult practices. Now, that's something I could wax on about, because I've had so many fascinating conversations about this with members of those fraternal families. And they are the ones who have explained to me, well, look, we never participated in anything, but we know that things were going on, but we were kept to the side. So you have conversations with those people. You ask them, well, how do you feel? And they say, I feel terrible about being born into this vector, and I want nothing to do with that stuff. I find it evil. So there's wars going on within these families, Clyde, is what I'm saying to you. There are internecine wars going on within the Black nobility. And I think that the good human element or aspect within those dynastic traditions and families are bifurcating into and reappointing and repurposing and retooling their lives and their influence to positive effect. Really important that we recognize that and don't try to become too.
I haven't heard this. I have not heard this.
Yeah, well, I'm accused by radicals for being an apologist for the Illuminati, and of course I'm a Crown agent and all that crap. I get this stuff all the time, simply because I chose a long time ago that I wanted to move into my inquiry in a state of absolute witness, and not be reactive or reductive, and not get pulled into any side of the equation, but to simply bear witness, which I still believe is the most powerful thing that a human can do, is to suspend all judgment, and simply bear witness. And then you can actually see that which it is, and not what you think you see or what you want to see. So that I've spent many long years refining that practice as a form of, I guess, a form of meditation and mindfulness. But what I've seen emerge is the humanity from the heart of darkness. And on the other side of the line, in the spiritual woo-woo, liberal, intellectual, lovey-dovey, yoga, schmoga bullshit, I've seen the heart of darkness emerge from that sector. So this is just part of the dialectic playing out. I'm just saying the most important thing I believe we can do is anchor a sense of absolution and redemption and love and empathy in our lives to the most, the greatest extent that we feel we can. And then where we feel we can't extend it, then just withdraw, but don't judge. I mean, if you go back to the good book, that for me is the seminal piece. Judgment clouds everything. You become sectarian or partisan. And once you've moved into that, you're just batting in one hemisphere or the other. And you will not be entering into that Christed nature of that noble expression, which is just waiting for each of us to engage that in ourselves.
Beautifully put. When you become judgmental or opinionated, you can't really find truth, because that blocks the truth from flowing, doesn't it? It blocks
It
the
does.
consciousness.
It certainly does. And the greatest gift we can bestow upon ourselves is to move into the sanctity of that ajudgmental state of pure witness. And that also is where the dispensation of the grace of God is to be met with. And we move into alignment with that grace. And then we start to see that the cancers fall away and the stress falls away. And life starts to open up. And that's actually hyperdimensional physics. I mean, I love this subject and can go into it at great length, because you literally change the spin of atoms in your field when you're transcoding or transducing as the human capacitor, the divine light that is yours. It belongs to you. We're all allocated a limitless capacitance to transcode life force into this vehicle, this vessel, and to then radiate it into the lateral plane, the field. And we do that really by grace and nothing more. But you can't do it if you are holding judgment. And right now, we're at such a constricted, dualistic bifurcation stage in the alchemy of our evolution, right, especially courtesy of this COVID corona pantomime, which is now pitting the masked against the unmasked, and the vaxxed against the unvaxxed. Yeah. That is a classic attempt to bring order out of chaos by the Sabbatean Illuminati. So driving this colossal fictitious wedge, which is also partly real because it's got bioweaponry connected to it, and people are dying, but they're not dying from what they think they're dying. And then the people who are getting vaccinated are getting the exosomic response and the shedding, and the spiked protein is coming out of them and affecting people who are not vaxxed and making them sick. And then everyone gets sick. And then it's who started this? This is a classic satanic ritual playing out en masse. But this kind of stuff has been designed in that Sabbatean basement for many, many long years. They've planned this one probably for half a century, if not longer. Now, I've spoken to very, very high-ranking intelligence people and people who are connected to the public health administration sector at the highest level. I'm talking Oval Office, okay, who've come and met me and spoken to me about this stuff. So this, and anyway, any good researcher out there who's studied the Jesuit oath knows full well what I'm talking about.
Right, right, yeah. How amazing. Wow. Well, hey, I just want to thank you so much for taking your time and sharing with everybody in our summit.
Thank you, Clyde. And the geometry is always perfect. It's always unfolding, and it's teaching each of us and refracting back to us and reflecting back to us everything that we need reflected back to us in the perfect now. It's
an interesting time to be alive, isn't it?
You sound like Dr. Charlie Ward. Be careful there.
I know that. Okay, thank you again so much.
Just can't wait to meet you in person. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.